My name is Liam. I'm 32 years old, and I fix things for a living in a quiet corner of a city that never stops moving. That's how I met my wife. I offered her my seat on a crowded train, a simple, thoughtless gesture, and she sat down, leaned in close as if sharing a secret of the utmost importance, and whispered the 7 words that would dismantle my life and then rebuild it into something I never knew I was allowed to want. Don't tell anyone I'm your wife. I remember the exact feeling of the air leaving my lungs, a soft, confused hiss. My brain stuttered, trying to connect a wire that wasn't there. Wife? I didn't have a wife. I barely had a life. For a long moment, I just stared at the back of her head, at the dark, wavy hair that fell just past her shoulders. She was staring straight ahead, her posture rigid, her hands clenched into tight fists in her lap. She looked like a soldier bracing for impact. And that's the moment. That's the precise second my world tilted on its axis. Because a sane person, a normal person, would have smiled awkwardly, maybe backed away slowly, and found another car to stand in. But I just stood there, holding onto the overhead bar, my knuckles white, and nodded as if she'd just asked me to pass the salt. I agreed to a lie for a complete stranger. 6 months later, I would be on one knee, asking her to make that lie the truest thing in our lives. But to understand why I didn't just walk away, you have to understand where I was. You have to understand the ghost I had become. Let me back up. Before that train, before her, my world was small. It was the size of a basement apartment in the pre-war building I managed. It smelled of damp concrete, oil, and the lemon-scented cleaner I used on the lobby floors. My life ran on a predictable, silent loop. At 6 in the morning, I'd check the boiler. At 7, I'd sweep the front steps. The rest of the day was a quiet parade of leaky faucets, buzzing light fixtures, and jammed locks. I was good at it. I could coax a dying radiator back to life with a gentle tap and a bit of patience. I could silence a squeaking floorboard with the precision of a surgeon. I could fix anything that was broken except for myself. I had switched off. That's the only way to describe it. A few years earlier, I had lost my dad. He wasn't just my father. He was my anchor, my compass, my best friend. We'd worked together, fixing things side by side since I was old enough to hold a wrench. His hands were calloused and kind, and his voice was a low, steady rumble that could make any problem seem small and manageable. When he died, the world didn't just go quiet. It went silent. The background music of my life just stopped. My girlfriend at the time, Claire, tried to be patient. She really did. But after a year of living with what she called my emptiness, she left. I remember her standing by the door, her keys in her hand. "It's like talking to a wall, Liam," she'd said, her voice more sad than angry. "You're here, but you're not. It's like you're a ghost in your own life." She wasn't wrong. I had become a collection of routines and responsibilities, a man defined by the things he could repair for other people. I had stopped wanting anything for myself. It was easier that way. Wanting was the first step to disappointment. So I lived in the basement, a ghost in the machine of the building. I ate alone, I watched movies alone, I slept alone. The silence was a comfortable blanket. I had convinced myself I was the kind of man who doesn't get a family, the kind who is meant to be on the periphery, the quiet superintendent who keeps the lights on for everyone else but lives in the dark. My dad had this saying. It was his core principle, the piece of wisdom he hammered into me more than any lesson about plumbing or wiring. He'd be watching people, maybe in a park or a crowded diner, and he'd lean over and whisper it to me. "You don't have to be the loudest man in the room to be the strongest, son," he'd say, his eyes thoughtful. "The strongest man is the one who builds a wall around the people who need it, brick by quiet brick, and never asks for a thank you." I had forgotten that lesson. I had stopped looking for people who needed a wall. I was too busy building my own, and I had walled myself in so completely I didn't think I'd ever get out. Until her, on the train. So when this woman, this stranger with fear in her eyes, sat down in my seat and made the single most bizarre request I had ever heard, I didn't see a crazy person. I saw someone who needed a wall right here, right now. And for the first time in years, some long dormant instinct, my father's voice in my ear, kicked in. So I stayed. I became her silent, invisible husband. A few minutes passed. The train lurched and swayed. She hadn't moved a muscle. I could see a man making his way down the crowded aisle. He was tall, handsome in that expensive, easy way some men are. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and he smiled at people as he squeezed past them. A practiced, charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were scanning, hunting. When they landed on her, they narrowed. Predator spotting its prey. He stopped right in front of us. "Alara," he said. His voice was smooth, but it had an edge of steel underneath. "I've been looking for you. You didn't answer my calls." The woman, Alara, visibly flinched but didn't look at him. She stared determinedly at the grimy window.
I'm busy, Marcus.
"Busy?" He laughed. A short, unpleasant sound. He gestured vaguely at me. "With him? Come on, honey. Let's go sit together. We need to talk." This was it. The test. I felt a surge of adrenaline. A feeling so foreign it was almost painful. My heart, that sluggish, forgotten muscle, started to pound. I shifted my stance slightly, placing myself more firmly between them. I didn't say a word. I just met his gaze. Marcus's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked me up and down, taking in my worn work jacket, my calloused hands, my simple steel-toed boots. The dismissal in his eyes was total. I was nothing, a piece of furniture. "Excuse me," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "My fiancée and I need a moment." Before I could even process the word, fiancé, Alara spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear, like a small bell ringing in a storm. "He's not my fiancé," she said, finally turning to look at him. Her eyes were defiant. "And this," she said, making a small, brave gesture toward me, "is my husband." She reached out and her small, cold hand found mine. She squeezed it at desperate, telegraphic pressure. "Help me. Please help me." Marcus stared at our joined hands. His face, for a moment, was a mask of pure, unfiltered rage before he smoothed it back into a look of concerned pity. He was good. I had to give him that. "Honey, what is this?" he said, his voice soft and patronizing. "Another one of your games? Who is this guy? Did you hire him?" He looked at me again. "How much is she paying you, buddy?" I felt my own anger rise, a hot, protective wave. But my dad's voice echoed in my head. Not the loudest man. I just held Alara's hand a little tighter and looked Marcus straight in the eye. "I think my wife would like you to leave her alone," I said. My voice was rusty from disuse, but it was steady. The standoff lasted for another 10 seconds. Felt like an hour. The train, the people, the noise of the city. It all faded away. There was only the three of us. Marcus, the charming bully. Alara, the terrified soldier. And me, the ghost who was suddenly terrifyingly solid. Finally, with a look of venom that promised this wasn't over, Marcus turned and stalked away. Alara let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for days. Her hand was still trembling in mine. "Thank you," she whispered, not looking at me.
I'm sorry.
"I'm so sorry. It's okay," I said. And the strangest thing was, we rode the rest of the way in silence, our hands still linked. When the train pulled into her stop, we stood up together, as if we'd done it 1,000 times. I walked her off the platform and onto the street. The pretense was over. The lie had served its purpose. She could go her way and I could go back to my basement. But I found I didn't want to. "He's my ex," she said abruptly, as if she owed me the rest of the story. "Marcus, we were engaged. I broke it off 3 months ago." He didn't seem to get the message. A bitter smile touched her lips. "He doesn't like to lose. He thinks I'm his property." She finally looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. Her eyes were a deep, exhausted shade of brown. "The thing is, my sister is getting married in 2 weeks. Her fiancé's company just got a huge investment, the one that's letting them start their dream business. The investor is Marcus." Ah, there it was. the final, damning piece of the puzzle. If I make a scene, she continued, her voice barely a whisper, if I get a restraining order, if I do anything to tarnish his public image, he'll pull the funding. He'll ruin her. He told me so. He said he'd be happy to do it. Self-sacrifice. She was taking the hits to protect her sister. And the world, her family, probably saw her as the difficult one. The unstable one who couldn't just let her ex go. Marcus had built a cage for her, and she was the only one who knew she was trapped inside. My family, they all love him, she said, confirming my thoughts. They think I'm being hysterical. They want me to just be civil, for my sister's sake. I felt that old, familiar ache in my chest, the one that came from seeing a deep structural unfairness in the world. A quiet person carrying a heavy burden while the loud ones got all the credit. It was the story of my father's life, in a way. He was the one who fixed the unfixable, who showed up in the middle of the night, who never sent a bill he knew someone couldn't pay. He was a quiet hero, and most people never even knew the battles he fought for them. I saw the same strength in her. We were standing in front of a small coffee shop. She was supposed to meet her sister there. This was the end of the line. Well, she said, pulling her hand from mine. The loss of contact felt strangely sharp. Thank you. For being my husband. Anytime, I said, and the word felt truer than I expected. She gave me a small, watery smile and turned to go inside. I should have walked away. I should have gone back to my station, back to my basement, back to my silence. But I stayed. I watched through the window as she greeted her sister. I saw her put on a bright, false smile. And then I saw her do something that cemented everything. As her sister talked, animated and oblivious, Alara reached into her purse, pulled out her wallet, and discreetly passed a wad of cash to the waitress, gesturing to the elderly couple at the next table who were looking at their bill with worried faces. She paid their tab, a secret act of kindness, performed while she was in the middle of her own personal hell. She thought no one was watching, but I was, and in that moment I saw her. I really saw her, not the damsel in distress, but the quiet warrior, the woman building a wall around her sister, brick by painful brick, and not asking for a single thank you. My dad's words came back to me, not as a memory, but as an instruction. Command. I waited until her sister left. Then I walked into the coffee shop. Alara looked up, startled, as I approached her table. I have a crazy idea, I said, before I could lose my nerve. It's probably a bad one, but he's going to be at that wedding, isn't he? Marcus. She nodded, her eyes full of dread. You need a husband for more than just a train ride, I said. You need a wall. Let me come with you. To the wedding. Let me be that for you. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Why? Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. I know you paid for that couple's lunch, I said simply. I think that's all I need to know. And so the agreement was made. For the next 2 weeks, we became professional liars. We met for coffee to invent our story. We had to build a life out of thin air. Where did we meet? She asked one afternoon, stirring her latte. At a bookstore, I said, surprising myself. I was fixing a loose shelf, and you were trying to reach a book on the top one. I climbed a ladder to get it for you. She smiled, a real smile this time, transformed her face. What book was it? A collection of poems, I said. The one with the blue cover. And our first date. An old movie theater downtown. The one that still has the red velvet seats. We saw a black and white film. Somewhere in the inventing, the strangest thing happened. We stopped inventing and started actually talking. I told her about my dad, about his hands, about his quiet strength. She told me about her passion for painting, a dream she'd put on hold to help her sister start her business. I learned that her favorite color was the deep green of a forest after it rains. She learned that I always carried a multi-tool in my pocket, just in case. We were building a fake history, but it was being laid on a foundation of real truth. I felt something waking up inside me, a slow, creaking thaw. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to the next day. I was becoming less of a ghost and more of a man. I was starting to want things again. I wanted to hear her laugh. I wanted to see her paint. I wanted to be the man she was inventing. The day of the wedding arrived like a ticking bomb. I rented a suit, felt foreign and stiff. Alara wore a simple, elegant green dress, the color of a forest after rain. When I saw her, I forgot how to breathe for a moment. The ceremony was beautiful. Alara's sister was radiant, but the whole time I could feel Marcus's eyes on us. He was sitting in the front row, the benevolent benefactor, smiling his perfect, empty smile. The reception was where the real battle would be fought. We moved through the crowd, a united front. Alara introduced me as Liam, her husband. The word felt less like a lie and more like a promise every time she said it. Her family was polite but distant. They looked at me the way Marcus had on the train, with confusion and a hint of pity for Alara, who had clearly acted out and married some handyman on a whim. We were standing near the cake when Marcus made his move. He approached with 2 glasses of champagne, his charm turned up to its highest setting. "A toast," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. To Alara, always so full of surprises, he handed her a glass. "We were all so worried about you after our breakup. It's wonderful to see you've landed on your feet so quickly." The insult was perfectly crafted. It painted her as flighty, unstable, and rash. It validated the story he had been telling everyone. I saw the hurt flash in her eyes, saw her shoulders slump. My first instinct was to punch him, to be the loud man. But then, my father's voice, calm and steady, brick by quiet brick. I didn't say a word to Marcus. I ignored him completely. I took the champagne glass from Alara's hand and set it on a nearby table. Then I took her other hand. "They're playing our song," I said softly, looking only at her. She looked confused. "We don't have a song." "We do now," I said. I led her to the dance floor. The band was playing a slow, simple melody. I pulled her close, one hand on her back, the other holding hers. She rested her head on my shoulder. It was the quietest act of defiance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply removed her from his orbit. I built a wall around her made of a simple waltz. On that dance floor, under the soft lights, he couldn't touch her. His words couldn't reach her. It was just us. I could feel the eyes of the room on us. They saw a man gently holding his wife. They saw a woman who looked not unstable, but safe, content, loved. They saw Marcus, standing alone by the cake, his charming mask slipping, his face tight with fury. The narrative was cracking. For the first time, people were seeing the truth without a single word of it being spoken. "How did you know what to do?" she whispered against my chest. "My dad taught me," I whispered back into her hair. "He taught me how to build things." We danced for 3 more songs. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. In the quiet space between the notes, something shifted forever. The line between pretend and real dissolved completely. This wasn't a performance anymore. I was a man holding the woman I was falling in love with, protecting her not with my fists, but with my presence. It was the most important repair job of my life. When we finally left the wedding, the air outside was cool and clean. We walked to my old, reliable truck in silence. The charade was over. The check had been cashed. I was supposed to drive her home and then return to my basement, the job complete. The thought was unbearable. I drove her back to her small apartment. I walked her to the door. This was it. The end of the story we had invented. "Well," she said, her voice small. "Thank you, Liam, for everything. You were a very good husband." "Alara," I said, the name feeling like it belonged to me. "I don't want to go back to my apartment." To the silence. "Being your fake husband. It felt more real than my actual life has in years." I took a breath. The biggest risk I'd ever taken. "This isn't pretend for me anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "It isn't for me either," she whispered. "When we were dancing, I wasn't pretending. I was just home. I didn't kiss her then. It was too soon, too much. Instead, I did the only thing that felt right. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my multi-tool. I pointed to a loose hinge on her apartment door. "That's going to squeak," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Do you mind if I fix it?" She laughed. A real, beautiful laugh that was worth more than all the champagne toasts in the world. "I'd like that," she said. So I fixed her door. And then I fixed a dripping tap in her kitchen. And then she made us tea, and we sat and talked until the sun came up. I never went back to my basement apartment, not really. My home was with her now. Our life together started not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a hinge falling back into place. 1 month later, we were still inventing. We invented a favorite park bench and spent every Sunday there, reading. 6 months later, we invented a shared home when she moved her paints and canvases into my newly brightened apartment. We painted the walls the color of a forest after rain. A year later, I took her to that old movie theater with the red velvet seats. I didn't have a fancy ring. I had something better. I had my father's wedding band. It was simple, worn, and made of plain gold. It wasn't a symbol of wealth or status. It was a symbol of quiet, steady, everyday work. The work of building a life. I knelt on the sticky floor, the credits rolling on some old black and white film, and I asked her to make our lie the truest thing in the world. She said yes. About a year after we were married, the vindication came. Not in a dramatic courtroom showdown, but in a small article buried on page 6 of the business section. Marcus's company was under investigation for fraud. He had built his empire on lies and intimidation. He lost everything. Alara's sister, horrified and ashamed, called us, weeping, apologizing for ever doubting her. Alara was gracious. She never said, "I told you so." She didn't have to. She was too busy living a life full of truth and color. Sometimes, when I'm working now, fixing a lock or patching a wall in our building, I think about that man I used to be. The ghost in the basement. The man who had walled himself in, convinced he was meant to be alone. I thought I was the one who saved her that day on the train. I thought I was the one building the wall to protect her. How wrong I was. I was a man who had forgotten how to feel, how to connect, how to hope. I was switched off. Alara walked into my gray, silent world and asked me to pretend to be alive for her. And in the act of pretending, in the process of inventing a life, I came back to my own. She didn't need a knight in shining armor. She was already a warrior, fighting her own battles with quiet courage. She just needed a witness, someone to see her, really see her, and stand with her. And I needed her. I needed her to hand me the blueprint to a life I was too broken to imagine for myself. She saved me from the silence. She saved me from the ghost I was becoming. She was the one who fixed me. The world is full of people like Alara. The quiet ones, the misunderstood ones, the ones carrying burdens you can't see. They're not looking for heroes to solve their problems. They're just looking for someone to stand with them, to be a quiet presence in the storm, to offer them a seat when they're tired of fighting, to see the truth of who they are, even when they're forced to pretend. My dad was right. You don't have to be the loudest man in the room to be the strongest. The strongest man is the one who shows up and starts laying the bricks quietly for the person who needs a wall. And if you're really lucky, you find out you're not just building a wall. You're building a home.